This is Dewan L. Hearn, more affectionately known as the Moon, and this is the Moon Equals Wrestling podcast. So I did an episode on the McMahon Netflix special, and with the special being 6 parts, the conversation that I had, which features Brian Haas, was about 4 hours long, 340. Uh, I know you don't want to sit through a 3 hour, 40-minute conversation I have about a documentary. So I'm splitting it up into multiple episodes. So this will go probably before each of the different parts and serve as sort of a content warning. Obviously, we're discussing Mr. McMahon. We understand the allegations that he's under right now. With that being said, the documentary does cover things that are sensitive, such as rape and sexual assault and sexual misconduct, and at one point suicide. So if any of these things are you're sensitive to, then maybe these aren't the episodes that you should watch, and you should probably definitely avoid the McMahon special. Otherwise, enjoy the different parts of this episode. Also, another fair warning: we are discussing someone who has some very negative allegations against them, and we are going to objectively look at the special and McMahon's presentation throughout the special as a whole. So while some of the things we say are complimentary and positive of Mr. McMahon as it relates to that part of the episode or that part of the series, please understand that nothing that we say, me or Mr. Haas, is a is giving a thumbs up or an okay to his obviously terrible behavior. We do not condone the behaviors of Mr. McMahon or anyone else mentioned in any of his various lawsuits. So please understand that and enjoy the show. WCW is dead. Ring of Honor is indie. New Japan is no television.
TNA is not a real.
TNA exists, and we don't give enough credit to TNA.
But it's not real competition.
For the record, TNA has been around for a lot longer than it deserved.
Long time.
TNA started in 2002.
Yeah.
It's been around for 22 years.
Yeah.
Non-stop. Different forms, different renditions, but 22 years.
Yep.
I don't think WCW official was around for 22 years.
I don't know. No.
TNA has outlasted WCW. It outlasted ECW.
You want to hear something crazy? I heard this stat the other day and it blew my fucking mind. AJ Styles has had more matches in WWE than he ever did in TNA. How is that possible?
That feels almost hard to believe.
Yeah, right? But it's true. It's 100%. It's 100% true.
Now I'll say this: the difference between TNA and WWE is the house show schedule.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure.
And I think that had a lot to do with the boost because he got to WWE in 16.
Yeah.
And so that's only been 8 years.
8 years, a little over, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. But the schedule's a lot harder.
Yeah.
It's a lot more. There's a lot more matches to have.
Yeah.
A lot more dates. So that's But even with TNA, which a lot of things get mentioned towards the end of this episode with the Women's Revolution, TNA did it better, and TNA did it first. And while we can give all the credit we want to Stephanie McMahon and the women in WWE and the Four Horsewomen and all that good stuff, take nothing away from them. But Gail Kim and Awesome Kong were having killer matches in 08.
Oh, yeah.
I wasn't even the world's biggest Gail Kim fan, but credit where credit's due. When Gail Kim, Awesome Kong, the Beautiful People, all of them did for women's wrestling.
Mickie James. There's a few others.
Mickie James deserves to be on a pedestal on her own for what she's achieved in WWE, achieved in NWA, achieved in TNA. She deserves
I feel like
all the accolade.
I feel like she was the only real contemporary to Trish Stratus. And she outlasted Trish. So
she's still wrestling.
Yeah, she's still going.
She's still you can book Mickey James today.
Yep. She was
Not
in,
sponsored.
yeah. She once upon a time she was in Glow, so that's how long
You
Mickey
could
James
you
has
could
been going
you can catch a Mickey James match today, I'm sure.
today.
Um,
Yep.
so one of the things in the beginning of this episode, episode 6, is we get into Vince McMahon talking about these two computers in his head, or trains of thought.
Yeah.
Right now, a lot of people, especially guys like you and me, we're creatives. We get distracted by
Oh yeah.
everything.
Yep.
I can watch this movie and read my phone and be thinking about how to turn this thing my friend said yesterday into a short script, right? So yeah, multiple trains of thought, not a weird thing, not crazy,
Right.
you know, but maybe, maybe Vince McMahon, when the producer asks you, "Oh, hey, so obviously you're paying attention to us right now.
Right.
What's your second train of thought of thinking right now?" This is probably now. I'll say this
So disturbing.
as a creative, I can give you lease to say anything, right?
Sure.
Your
Pretty much.
mind can be on literally anything,
Pretty
right?
much.
Everything,
Yep.
but this one thing. The one thing you should not have said is something fun involving sex.
Yeah.
This is where I know that they are starting to set shit up. Because don't
Yeah.
get me wrong, Vince says it, and it's one of those things where I've seen documentaries start wanting to, clip things together and put the most convenient thing in the most convenient part. But
Yeah.
it's a solid cut.
Yeah.
You hear the producer talking to him, so it's not like we're cutting answers. You hear the producer there. You know it's a single shot,
Yep.
and Vince that's just his natural
Yep.
reply. And I'm like, that is exactly what you should not have said in this episode.
Oh yeah.
You should not have said
Well,
that.
this is where the hubris finally gets him. Where it's like he felt like he was untouchable for so long, and he was the king of his own kingdom for so long, and he finally agreed. Like if he would have never agreed to sell to whatever you want to call that company, TKO or
He sold to
UFC or
Endeavor, and they created
Endeavor, yeah, right. If he would have agreed to, if he never would have agreed to sell, then we wouldn't be having this. This episode would have not have existed. We would
this
still
would
be
this whole
talking.
no.
Yeah, we would still be talking about Vince McMahon running WWE. But because he
Well,
did that, there's finally accountability, and I love. Nothing makes me more happy than when a bad actor finally gets their fucking card pulled. I love that shit. I fucking love that
so
shit, and it was so satisfying to watch that with this. You know.
so I think the only part I disagree with is I think that with the accusations coming out, there's still going to be a separation of WWE and Vince McMahon.
Oh,
Because
sure.
now, by the time the second accusation comes through from his return, and we touch on that here in this episode, um, that second lawsuit would probably be, listen, listen, we get your
It
shareholders
would have been
data.
a tougher sell, but like
That
he's
he
still the
still
guy.
had that. He had the control. He had that
Yep.
power, and it's hard to say where WWE would be right now
Yep.
if it was not for the Endeavor sell, if it wasn't for um, Ari Emanuel being the CEO and being running things. I mean, like you got
It's ironically been a really good thing for the WWE. They're more
they
popular
have
now than they probably
strived.
have ever been
They since the Attitude Era.
since the
This is as
Attitude Era.
close to a resurgent of Attitude Era type numbers
Yep.
as you're going to get in modern time.
And they certainly weren't doing 2 nights of WrestleMania and 2 nights. Now they're talking like we're going to do
Two
2 nights of.
SummerSlams,
Yeah, they're going all the big ones, right? All Royal Rumble,
Rumble,
SummerSlam, and Survivor Series. They're going to do 2 nights for all of them, right?
and
Just
and
like
I disagree with a 2 night SummerSlam. I
I
disagree
don't
with a
care.
2 night Rumble. But that's again, that's if it happens, I'm not gonna be mad.
There's a lot of talent and there's not a lot of slots. And if you want to put like a second night so that you can get more people on there to pay more people, totally fine with that. You know,
I'm not against people getting paid. I just
especially
having a
now where it seems like they're not.
having a 2 night mania is great.
Yeah,
That has worked out good. That was circumstantial. That was an accidental thing that just had
yeah,
to fit in for COVID times. That just turned out to work after that. Because I'll tell you that before that COVID mania, um, I remember going to my buddy's house and watching WrestleMania and having it start around 7 and end around
like
midnight and falling
9
asleep
hours
halfway through.
long. Yeah,
It's
exactly.
ridiculous.
Yeah,
But we get into Battle of the Billionaires with
yep.
Trump. We just, boy, this is a whole bunch of names you don't want to talk about anymore.
I know, right?
Um, Vince McMahon had the match with Donald Trump, and they start talking about how Donald Trump, in his current, this is not being political, this is what's talked about in the documentary, but Donald Trump's current portrayal as a statesman, as a
Mm-hmm.
politician, is very reminiscent of his portrayal of himself as a wrestling star.
Mm.
And his involvement in WrestleMania. So I mean, because he showed up there, he's been in wrestling a bit. There was a special guest host thing turned into the sale of Monday Night Raw. So there was like the 1 week of Trump's
Right,
Raw.
right.
Um, then there was the sellback, and then there was the Battle of the Billionaires. Um, Again, at that time, he was a mainstream guy.
Yeah,
He was just a billionaire mainstream guy. And again, it was
The
no different
Apprentice.
than Logan Paul or Mr. T, where it's just like somebody that people watched and paid attention to
Yep.
is now going to come here and watch and pay attention to your product. And that in itself is not a bad thing,
No.
politics notwithstanding.
Right.
Um, then we get into the death of Vince McMahon storyline.
Oh God, I'd forgotten all about the death of Vince McMahon
I
storyline.
hadn't. I never forget about that because I remember that it was the memorial. So they did the Death of McMahon storyline where Vince McMahon blows up in a.
I remembered it as soon as they said it, but like I was just like, oh God, I forgot
I'll
this
admit,
and how
the
fucking
edit
dumb
was
it
good.
was.
The edit was good. It was a good cut.
Yeah, that's
Um,
fair. That's fair.
it was done well, and they played into it, and they played it up to be kayfabe because of kayfabe. And on the episode where they were going to do the memorial, basically the funeral service for Mr.
And
McMahon,
the reveal, obviously, too. Yeah, but
probably.
probably.
There's no real way of knowing how that's
Yeah,
supposed to
you
play
never
out.
know, but probably
But probably something, if not the reveal, the seeds would have been sown.
something
For the
big.
reveal.
Something big. Yeah.
Right. And we find out earlier in that day that Benoit and his family are dead. Now, let's remember that this is a pay-per-view weekend.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
This was an ECW pay-per-view weekend.
CM
They were
Punk
going to
was
crown the
supposed to wrestle.
ECW champion.
Yeah.
He had a match against
CM Punk. CM Punk.
Punk, yeah. I was trying to remember which one was the official match. Was it Punk the official match or Morrison the official match?
No,
It
Morrison was the
It
replacement.
was Benoit versus Punk. Benoit versus Punk was the main event. The finals of the tournament to crown an ECW champion.
Yep.
People have been trying to get a hold of Benoit all weekend. His
Yep.
buddies and shit. They couldn't. Sunday comes. He no-shows the event.
Yep.
They replace him with Morrison.
Yep, Morrison. Yep.
Morrison becomes the ECW champion.
Yep.
We have Monday Night Raw in the story of McMahon, and that's when the news comes out about why we didn't hear from from Benoit, and Benoit and his family are dead.
Yep.
And we don't. That's all we know publicly at this time. When Monday Night Raw starts and the arena's empty, Vince McMahon's in the ring. I remember watching this like, oh shit, there's McMahon. Some shit went down. Oh
Right.
yeah, this. Yeah, the arena is empty. They never have an empty arena. They canceled the show essentially.
Yep.
They canceled. This is how big a deal it was, and
Yep.
I only emphasize this point because of how much they emphasized it
And then
versus how much it
bit them
had
in
to
the
do.
ass.
Yeah. So there's no audience. There was no crowd. They canceled the show.
Yep.
They were devastated. And this kind of goes into one of those separation of artists and in their art because a lot of people still want Benoit in the ring in the Hall of Fame. You're not going to get it, and
No.
um, but they're like, should his entire 15-year career be overshadowed by the events of one weekend? Yeah, in this case, kind of yeah.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean,
yeah,
there's not
I mean,
really
this
like. Look, I was the biggest Benoit fan. I loved Benoit. I loved the underdog aspect of it. I loved that he got shit on by WCW when I felt like he deserved it. Like,
prove me wrong.
right? Yeah, I feel like he should have been champ. And they finally like the last second they're like, oh, maybe you should be champ. And he's like, nah, too fucking
They
late.
gave him this, kind of, and he threw it in
Right,
the face.
kinda, yeah. They gave it to him on Sunday, and then Monday night he shows up on Raw. But I was the biggest Benoit fan, and my absolute favorite moment in wrestling history. It's not even close. Is the end of WrestleMania 20, where Eddie Guerrero comes out and hugs fucking Chris Benoit, and I was just like, I never thought I was going to get this moment. I love both of those guys so much, and they were neither one of them were world champion material
In
in my
everybody's eyes, outside of
right
like the diehards.
right in my estimation, WWE was never going to make them champion, right? And then all of a sudden, Eddie beats Brock, and like,
Great match, No Way Out, 2004.
yep. And then
Fabulous
and
match.
then the end of the night is Benoit putting the crippler crossface on Hunter, and I was like, I was losing my shit. I'm like,
It was.
they're,
I
because
I think I cried then
I'm
too.
like, I'm literally sitting there going, they're not going to do this, are they? They're not really going to do this, are they? Like, am I finally going to get what I want? Like, the guy that I wanted to win never really won usually. And
Right.
I was just like, and Benoit's never going to be champ and all these things. And then it happens, and Eddie and Guerrero come out. Eddie Guerrero and Benoit have their hug at the end. And I'm like, God, this is like one of the really great moments in wrestling history. And I was,
It really was. It's one
and
of my favorite wrestling photographs. It's that
yeah,
one,
and now
and
it's
it's
like the
the
biggest kick in the fucking teeth that you can have for wrestling. But like,
because yeah, that was the WrestleMania triple threat match between him, Shawn, and Triple H.
and Benoit wasn't
Eddie
supposed to be there, and none of
Eddie
it.
Eddie went well. Benoit won the Rumble.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I remember. Yeah,
Benoit won the Rumble. These two were arguing over who gets to fight Benoit.
right.
No, they want the shot. Shawn wants a shot at Triple H,
Hmm.
and Benoit's like, "Well, I won the Rumble, so I'm gonna go. I was
Right.
one."
They were trying
And
to
so they're
like
like, "Well, fuck it, we're
muscle
gonna do
him
triple
out.
threat."
Yeah.
Eddie wins the belt at No Way Out on
The
4
pay-per-view
against
before.
Brock,
Yeah.
and then he defends the championship successfully against Kurt Angle at WrestleMania.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Oh, great! And
Yep.
so some of my favorite WrestleMania like wrestling photos is that hands in the air and Randy Orton kissing his championship when he wins the title at SummerSlam later that year.
Mm.
And again, when I buy the DVD for Randy Orton's first DVD set, his championship match is not on that DVD
Mm.
because he won it from Chris Benoit.
Yeah, I know. I was like, oh yeah.
And
I was like, oh, I remember who he won it from.
so when you go through that Randy Orton history, you can't talk about that first match.
Yeah.
When he won his first world title. You can
I
talk
wish
about
they
all
would
the
just
evolution stuff after that,
I wish they
but
would just acknowledge it, because like it's not like people don't know, and it's not like you can't find that shit if you go on the internet. So
they don't
like,
want to endorse it. They don't want to seemingly endorse
fair. It's fair, I guess, but
it. And I'm with you. I'm
own your
with you on
flaws.
this.
Like, I
It's
think if
just
you own your flaws, it makes you
I don't see this
better
as
as
a
a
flaw
person.
thing. This is history thing.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
talked about at the beginning of this almost 3 hours ago that um
Oh yeah, 2 hours and 50 minutes and 38 seconds so far.
that you know if you ignore history, you're doomed to repeat it.
Yep.
And it's not like we're doomed to repeat the Randy Orton title win, but it's like it happened.
Yep.
It happened. It
Yeah.
sucks. It's tragic. It happens. But we talk about Benoit because one of the things that they do discuss in this episode is um, kind of the blame of all these people dying, these
Right.
wrestlers who are dying. And I made very distinct note at some point. Your boy Mushnick says that the fans didn't care, right, about the deaths of
That's not true.
Benoit, Guerrero, Test, and there are so many. And I get that the fact that there are so many is what Mushnick was talking about. But to that guy, respectfully, fuck you, dude.
Yeah.
Um, because when those wrestlers died, we were impacted. We brought these wrestlers when we were their fans. They were part of us. They were part of our family, part of our cliques. We cared deeply about what happened to them. I cared when Eddie Guerrero died. I cared
Yeah.
when Chris Benoit died.
I did too.
When I found out that Test died, that broke my heart because Test was a great wrestler.
Yeah.
Um, um, Garrison Cade, he passed away. I cared about that. You know, all of these wrestlers passed away, and they you know, we lost both of 3 Minute Warning, um, Umaga and Rosie,
Yeah.
and those impact us. But when we're watching the product, we're watching the product,
Yep.
and we care uh, 21 hours a day.
Yep.
But the 3 hours that Raw is on, we're focusing on what's wrong,
Yep.
what's going on Raw. So that's such a a damned condemnation of wrestling fans to say we didn't care, just bring us the new guy, the next guy.
Dude, I
That
was so
is that is a well, I appreciate him as a journalist, as a
sure.
writer to a writer. I appreciate him as a journalist. I appreciate him bringing the truth about some dark parts of pro wrestling to
Yeah.
light. I respect the work that he did, but to have that sort of inclination about wrestling fans, that is to dehumanize us as people
Yeah.
and to say that we can't connect. So to that, I say, fuck you. Um,
Yeah. And it still holds true to this day. Like, how upset was everybody when Bray died? Like everybody was
shattered.
they were fucking destroyed, And he's a kid, and at this point, you're like, I thought we were past this, where like these kids are dying, right? Like
Right.
that seems more like just sort of a product of like bad circumstances and stuff, and I don't think that
Yeah.
Bray Wyatt's going to be like indicative of like what's going to happen. Like the
No,
kids just
because the,
aren't.
the,
It's
the
not like
Bray death was different. The
right.
Bray death was
It's
different.
not a bunch of 40-year-olds dying in WWE anymore. So like
Right. And looking at the Eddie Guerrero, for example, Eddie
right,
Guerrero died. He was clean and sober at the time.
right.
But what he had done previously
It
had
was
damaged his heart,
way
and
too much. Yeah,
it was just a ticking time bomb at that point.
right. You can't do that much cocaine and not have repercussions. So I'm
Right.
sorry, Eddie. I love you. I love you, Eddie, so much. But yeah. Anyways,
So the next part of this is Chris Nowinski.
yeah,
Bringing Nowinski back in, who comes in as a neuroscience, not so much a former wrestler. He said he looked at when he had concussed, he had a concussion, and they just dismissed him as being weak. He
yep,
decided, like, I'm gonna retire, but I'm gonna come back. I'm gonna look at this stuff, right? So he does, and he notes that the people just did not take concussions seriously, and they really didn't. There's a whole movie that Will Smith did
yeah, the
about
Will
this
Smith
exact
movie.
topic,
Yep,
and title concussion. And it's true that like you look at the NFL, FIFA, NHL, all these organizations, it took them the longest time to take concussions seriously. And this is when we get into some of the shitty thing that Stone Cold Steve Austin said, we alluded to earlier in the
the
episode,
CTE being fake and all that shit.
where he's like, I got a concussion maybe once. And if you're
Right.
getting concussed over and over and over again, you're doing something wrong. Maybe you shouldn't be wrestling. CTE, I just don't believe it. I'm not a CTE guy. I don't believe it.
Right.
And this is where, again, not to get political, because I do not know where Austin stands on politics. But this is I'm not going to get into it. I don't want to get into it. But this is a matter of, this is indicative of people in our country who look at science as fairy tale.
Yeah.
They treat science as fairy tale. Like I said when we were talking earlier, this isn't Santa Claus. You know, this isn't the Easter Bunny. It's not something to believe in. It is science. It is science. You don't have to believe in that. You can believe the grass is green. You can think it's purple.
Yeah.
It's still green. Like it's still green. Like your belief doesn't really have an impact on science.
Right. And Austin offering, anecdotal evidence that, I didn't have a ton of concussion. Well, it doesn't fucking matter. And also, by the way, Stone Cold Steve Austin, I don't know if you remember this or not, but Owen Hart gave you a nasty pile driver that almost ended your fucking career before it
shortened
even
it.
Started.
It shortened it.
It certainly shortened it. You're right. And I think
that's just a stinger.
Yeah, it was no big deal. No big deal.
Just a stinger.
It was fine.
It's fine.
That was before he was even champion, right? That was for the Intercontinental title. That wasn't even for the big title, And I'm not gonna, like everybody loves Owen, and I think that is actually legitimately earned. I think that all the stories I hear about him, he just sounds like the most wonderful human, but like he legitimately almost fucking killed you in the ring. So like maybe you should believe that story. You know?
But he comes from a point in time where it's a stinger, you shake it off.
Right.
And this is indicative of some of the stuff that we saw earlier, where this is a matter of the times where they didn't believe in.
Unfortunately,
they didn't take certain things seriously.
Right.
New sciences, and that's the thing about like new sciences, like concussion protocols and studies. At a time that Austin was coming through the business, it was a new study. People treated DNA the same way. In the 80s, in the 80s, people were like, what is, I'm supposed to like, like my blood is different than your blood all of a sudden? Like you can't tell it. Why are you even bothering with this? This is a waste of time. They laughed at DNA evidence. Now it's second nature. They laughed at CTE. Now it's second nature. There are a lot of other factors in medicine that have gotten dismissed.
So two things that I do want to give credit to late stage Vince for, and I don't think that he really deserves a lot of credit for this, but like he saw that it was going to be a problem and he got ahead of it, and that was the concussions. And that was the wellness policy, right?
Yes.
And he was forced into both of them, so I don't want to give him
circumstance really forced him to do it, but he did embrace it.
Right, but like he was the first, right? So like he did it way before the NFL did. He was just like, oh shit, like Nowinski, who is probably the one person that comes out smelling like a rose out of this documentary, but like he was literally like. I went to Vince afterwards and said, there's brain damage here and like this could be a real problem. And Vince was like, I don't want to get sued. So let's do no more chair shots. No more 11 fucking chair shots for Mick Foley and his I Quit match where he can't even fucking, oh my God, he couldn't even.
I had a hard time watching that match.
Say the words.
That's the I Quit match. That was the I Quit match.
It bothers me way more than the Hell in the Cell. Way more.
Yeah.
Way more.
Those are harsh to watch.
Yeah.
Taker. This is one of the things. So we started this off kind of following WrestleMania. We're at WrestleMania 30. Yeah. And this is Taker Brock. This is where the streak ends. And it's a last minute change to finish so that Brock goes over.
Yeah.
And Vince talks about how that threw off Undertaker, right? He was emotionally impacted by having to lose the streak to
Yeah.
Brock.
Yeah.
Taker says that about 5 minutes into his 25-minute match, he gets concussed.
Yeah.
And to this day, he can't remember.
Doesn't remember anything.
Right. And I don't understand like the exact science of what is happening during concussion. So I'm not going to speculate. But he doesn't remember that to this day, and he knows he was severely concussed. And then Vince McMahon claims that Mark Calloway, can't remember the match because he was too impacted by losing the Brock. The way that these things are just dismissed by people who, again, these are people who believed a certain way.
Yeah.
Science changed things.
Yep.
Life is different now, and they can't accept the new change.
Yeah.
They can't accept the change of things. But the Undertaker talks about how clearly concussions were a problem. It was a problem for him, and he understands that.
Yeah.
This goes into Mania, Women's Evolution, PG era, Mania 32, Shane and Taker, and this is where Shane talks a lot more about his relationship with his dad. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and this, go ahead.
No, yeah, like this is so like it's really hard for me to like have strong opinions either way about Stephanie and Shane just because like you can't imagine what it was like to grow up in that environment and
I have no idea.
To have that be the only way that you could really get your parents' acceptance, like not their mom, but like.
Right. But Shane does mention how he got a hug and a pat on the back after the Taker match at 32. It's like that's all I wanted. That's all I ever wanted. All I ever wanted at WrestleMania 32. All I ever wanted was a hug, and I'm proud.
From my dad, it's like
I think about that. I have two boys. They are 10 and 8, and I think about that all the time. I tell my boys, "I love you," all the time, every day. I hug them. I show affection to my sons.
Yeah.
I don't want them being nearly 40 wondering, oh man, I wonder what it's like to have my dad's approval.
Like desperately grasping at straws to try and get your father's.
Crazy to me.
Yeah. It's terrible. And like there was one so just recently Powerhouse Hobbs, who's in AEW, and not like the biggest star or anything, but he's
a great performer.
But he's he's a lot of fun to watch, and I really enjoy him a lot. And he's a brick shithouse, is what I like to call.
He's called Powerhouse Hobbs for a reason.
Exactly. He reminds me of Big E, or like somebody like that, where I'm just like, God, I wouldn't want to fuck with that guy,
Think Big E, but like taller,
another 25 pounds,
a little bit more cut.
Yeah,
like a like a young cut version of Mark Henry.
Yeah, that's a perfect example. Yeah. And he was talking about how he has boys and he teaches them that it's okay to cry and have emotions and things like that. And I was like, wow, that's really amazing. And, you think of those sorts of things when Shane says, I desperately tried to get my father's approval for 40 plus years. And the only time that he really ever seemed to give a shit was when I jumped off the, 25-foot structure to smash my body. Yeah, it's just like, oh my God.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Tony Atlas, we talk about, he talks, we kind of get to this part here where it's talking about Succession
Mm-hmm.
and how Shane's too nice.
Yep.
Stephanie's a boss. She's like
Yep.
her dad. She's tough. Shane's too nice. He says, when you're the boss and you're nice and people see your niceness, they will try to take advantage of
Mm-hmm.
you. We're talking about how the show is basically run by Vince, Triple H, and Stephanie. The company is basically run by those three at the time. We're talking
Yep.
2022. Booker T, when talking about Vince McMahon, uh, like, what would it take for Vince McMahon to retire? And Booker T says, a nuclear bomb.
Yep.
And boy, is this the time to make that edit. Boy, was this a way to make that cut. Because this episode, you can tell that this is the part where shit happens. It's
Yeah.
at this point where we are in June of 2022, and the first set of accusations come out. It's the hush money NDA scandal.
Yep.
And Vince is so cocky that he shows up on TV.
Yeah, right? Oh my God.
I remember thinking,
If I was
oh
his
shit,
lawyer,
we'll never
I'd be
see
like,
Vince
you are
McMahon
so
again.
fired.
Like, we'll never see you on TV again. He's going to open up the show on Monday night, on Friday Night SmackDown.
Right.
What the fuck? He's going to open up Monday night or Friday Night SmackDown. Oh shit. Oh shit. We're gonna, but that's what they wanted from us.
Yeah.
What the fuck is he going to say?
Yeah.
Opening up Friday Night SmackDown. And he just said, hi, welcome to Monday Night.
Yeah, he doesn't even say
welcome to SmackDown. And then he leaves. And
Yep.
we all know that is just a big, huge fuck you.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, oh, you're going to take me on WWE? Try it. And
Yep.
they did.
And they did take it.
So all these accusations come out. They flash back to a situation he dealt with in 2006, where he was at a tanning salon, and he was accused of showing naked pictures of himself to a woman there and groping her. And weeks later, there was a storyline where Mickey James was falsely accusing some guy.
Yeah.
I don't remember that story, but a few weeks later, this is again another example of how the real life things that happen in Vince McMahon's world show up on WWE TV as programs.
And he doesn't fucking care.
Because it's almost like he's like, oh, well,
I'm bulletproof.
Yeah,
I'm bulletproof.
Yeah. So he is accused of a few things. He announces retirement. Mm-hmm. Stephanie leads the thank you chant. And this is where I want to ask. Conjecture, obviously full opinion. Mm-hmm. Like, what could have been going through Stephanie's?
I think, so to me, because, like, I think she knew the writing was on the wall. And she
the accusations are already out.
Right.
The lawsuits are already out.
Yeah.
It's already public. Everyone already knows. But now you, as a woman, his daughter, have to go lead the rah behind your father who's retired.
Well, she's not 100%. While I say all those things, right? You know, like, it seems very obvious that, like, the shit is about to get ugly. This has happened dozens of times during Vince's career, you know, where it's just like, oh man, this is going to take Vince down for sure. And it's just like, yeah, it's what you do when you're a promoter in a wrestling business or whatever. And so I think probably she ultimately, in the back of her mind, was like, well, what if this really isn't the end, right? You know, so, like, I have to, like, portray that we're all really sad that this is happening, even though I don't think she was sad that was happening at all.
No, and you can tell later on with the with some actions that she does later here in a little bit.
Right. And yeah, right, exactly. She takes actions that legitimately say, okay, this is bullshit, you know. Yeah. But like she might not have been 100% convinced that was the end of Vince. And if that's the case, you have to be careful about what you're saying because he might be back in 2 weeks, or whatever. Like we thought he
Yeah.
was already done, and now he's back again. It's like how many
And
how many lives does this guy have?
uh,
And
I
that
wish
was
I had
it. It
counted
turns
because
out
we're
that was
looking at
it.
this is
But
clearly life number 8.
yeah,
Because they did they asked Meltzer about uh, the retirement,
yeah,
and then they bring him back after this
after
before
everything
the announcement.
breaks. Yeah,
So after everything breaks, they bring back Meltzer, Dave Meltzer, the Wrestling Observer
yeah,
newsletter, um, and he's like, "This is this is this is tip of the iceberg," and Vince is back, and he's like, "The board had like he brings note that the board had." So he leaves, he retires,
yep,
and he's kind of like second guessing whether or not he should be gone. Maybe he was coerced to leave
right,
and might need to see what. Yeah, maybe I shouldn't have. And then
right.
the board's
Having
like,
having second thoughts.
yeah, and the board's like, hey guys, do we think we want Vince back? And they vote no. And
Yeah,
Vince's like, oh, so I'm coming back. I'm gonna
yeah,
use. You guys need to redo your TV deal, and I have the majority vote. So
right.
you're not going to make any deal
Without
unless
me.
I say so,
Yep,
and I won't say so unless I'm back.
right.
So he brings himself back using that clout. He
Yep,
redoes the board, and this is the part where Stephanie's like, "I'm out.
yep.
I can't do it." And so she leaves, and that's when we do the sell. Um, Endeavor buys WWE, merges it with UFC. We get TKO, and um, then we get to Pritchard.
Oh God, Bruce Pritchard, what a fucking piece of shit that guy is.
Now I'll frame this really quick. Pritchard, at this point, mind you, most of this documentary has been done prior to everything coming out. We're
Right,
now in a part that is post announcement.
right.
Everything's been out and revealed, and Pritchard has actually seen some of the documentary
Yeah, he seemed like the
and
first two
comes back
episodes.
to talk about it. And I think he does this because he says he feels that Vince got slighted.
Right,
It was a gotcha piece, was the term they
right,
used. And I think he felt obligated to come back and speak on Vince's behalf because Vince would not come back.
right.
But he felt that they're like it was a gotcha piece, and I think you did wrong. So the producer's asking him, well, what do you think we left out? And he says the human side of Vince McMahon, and then he tells this story, this very emotional story
Yeah,
about how Bruce's wife was diagnosed with cancer and
right,
given
right.
4 year tops,
Yep.
4 years tops, and that was 24 years ago. Vince McMahon made sure that Bruce Pritchard, his wife, had everything she needed, the
Yep.
best doctors, the best care, which is pretty indicative of the American healthcare system, but not that show. Um, and that's 24 years ago. So that's 20 extra years. She was told by her doctors she would not otherwise have.
Yep.
So all the love to Pritchard's wife and the
Right.
struggle.
Right.
Cancer fucking sucks. Fuck cancer. Blah blah blah. Um, but 2 days later, 2 days later is when the Janelle um, Grant accusations come out. So it's one of those things where you see a loyalist, right?
Yep.
Someone who's been super loyal to a guy, and despite how bad the the news is, they just can't shake. But he's a good guy.
Yeah.
And funny enough, after I watched episode 6, which was this morning, I was trying to find something else to watch, and I found Dirty Pop on Netflix. This is not about Dirty Pop, but Dirty Pop is the documentary about Lou Pearlman, the guy who put together NSYNC
Yeah, yeah.
and the Backstreet Boys. And if you haven't seen that special, that docuseries, you absolutely should. Be a boy band fan or not, NSYNC fan or not, watch it anyway because you see the same behaviors
Oh
And
yeah.
that's what I noted. You see the same behavior. You have a guy who's leading a charge. He starts from nothing. He becomes a big, huge something. Lots of money is involved,
Yep.
and he's got a close circle around him.
Yep.
And that close circle around him stays deathly loyal to him
Oh yeah.
till the end.
Till the end
Um, and that's what happens here
with Bruce.
with
Yeah.
Pritchard.
Yeah.
Now, in this last lawsuit, the Janelle Grant lawsuit, she comes with receipts. She's got screenshots of conversations. The screenshots are included in the lawsuit, so public document. We all get to read them. They're fucking gross. uh, whew, whew.
Yeah.
Screenshots. John Laurinaitis is implicated.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Unnamed, but but a WWE superstar who was a former UFC champion, who's being
Who could that be?
Brock Lesnar is the
Right.
name that
Exactly. Yeah.
his name is not written on the paper. So
Right. Right.
Brock
They never
Lesnar,
explicitly say, but
right?
we all know.
Yeah, Brock
Allegedly.
Lesnar.
Allegedly.
Like I said, it is suspected to be.
Suspected. Yes. Thank you.
It is suspected to be Brock Lesnar, though
Yeah.
not specified. John
Not
Laurinaitis is
specified,
implicated by
but
name.
certainly suspected.
John Laurinaitis is implicated by name.
Yeah.
He has since turned around and sued um, for as a victim himself. This was not in the documentary, but that's just he has the lawsuit himself now, where he's claiming to be the victim. Follow that on your own.
Yeah.
Oh God,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
that case is nasty.
Yeah.
They touch on Ashley Massaro, the
Oh,
accusations
poor
that she.
Ashley Massaro.
They touch on her accusations, where she claims that she was sexually assaulted at a uh, uh, Tribute for the Troops show. And this would eventually be attributed to her eventual suicide.
Right.
Um, I'll just take a moment right here. If you have ever been impacted by a suicide, you know the hotline number has been shortened. It is, I think, 988.
Yeah.
Listen, call somebody. We need you tomorrow.
I'd rather have an awkward conversation
than be at your funeral.
Yeah.
I would much rather call me at 3 a.m.
Yeah.
You can eat. Hell, you know what? My email is available on the website. You can email me. It's public. dlhearnwrites@gmail.com. If you're going through some shit, you need somebody to rant to, you can email me. I don't care. I'll make myself available. You have a reason. There are resources. Please seek them out. But there's the claims that after she made these accusations originally, her character was just embarrassed and made to look stupid. And I think this is a character assassination, essentially.
Oh yeah. Totally.
And this is where the docuseries ends. We spend about half the docuseries talking about the docuseries.
Yeah.
But that was it. And it was, I think it was a great trip down memory lane for wrestling. But it really did put our wrestling memory and wrestling history into a very interesting context.
Yep.
As it applies to Vince McMahon. And I think the documentary was done well as a documentary, objectively. I think it was done well. And
so a couple of things I'll say about it.
Yeah, I was just gonna. I mean, I'm kind of speechless when it comes to that episode 6 and what we kind of feel and learn.
It's weird that like it doesn't really get super ugly until episode 6, and you're just like, oh god, I want to fucking shower. Like, you know, I was joking to somebody. I was like, I felt like I wanted to take a shower while I was watching the episode. You know.
Yeah.
And so like some of the things that I will say about the authenticity of the documentary, because I'm sure that's going to be people. Oh well, you know, it's a like Bruce Pritchard said, oh, it's an assassination piece or whatever, showing what a true piece of shit Bruce Pritchard is. I knew that for a long time. Like Ronda Rousey in her tell-all book, like really drags Bruce Pritchard through the mud.
She doesn't hold back in her interview with Chris Van Vliet.
nope, not at all.
Chris
And
Van Vliet
so,
interview is that's a good one.
yeah, I mean, if that didn't kill Bruce Pritchard, then I don't know what will. But like it's weird to me that they were going to him as like this. I mean, I get it. He's intricately involved in like the day-to-day operations of WWE, but also I think everybody knew at that point what a piece of shit he was. But
It was
like,
post events, so he was
right.
it was an
So
important name to use.
exactly. I mean, it's just like, yeah, you have to talk to him, but also, why are you talking to this
Yeah,
guy? But Bill Simmons has done amazing sports documentaries about lots of different topics for a long time now. He did the really great Andre the Giant documentary from 2 or 3 years ago that was on ESPN. Um,
so 30
that
for 30.
Yeah, the 30 for 30. He was intricate in the creation of the 30 for 30 series,
Yeah,
and like was
that's where I know the
very,
name from. 30 for 30
yeah, and was intricately um, involved in like the Last Dance, which is an amazing. Like, if you've never seen the Last Dance about the Bulls
Yeah,
dynasty, it's incredible, and it's like preposterous, and it's like you unbelievable, and like on it's just crazy all the way around. But like it's so well done that like I just can't, like, when I see all these other things that he's done, I'm just like, well, this has to be true because like he's just so even keeled and awesome about like all these amazing, just crazy, amazing sports stories that you would never think about. Like, what's the story behind that?
yeah.
He's like done all these documentaries about it. And like the thing that I know about Bill Simmons is he is passionate about wrestling, right? This isn't some guy that's like, oh, I'm here to shit on wrestling, right? Because it would have been easy to make a documentary about that. Plenty of people have already done it. But like he doesn't want that. He fucking loves wrestling. He fucking understands what an art form it is, and this is like a fuck you to Vince McMahon. And so like I'm not
I
sure
feel
that it
like it's
started
just
out that
Vince. It is
way.
what it is.
Yeah, I'm not sure it started out that way, but like the the story the storyline changed in the middle of the like, oh wow, this guy's a real heel. So like we can't cheer this guy anymore. Even if we'd love to hate him, or whatever. Fuck this guy. And so like
I think
it
it's the
was like,
same thing with the Ric Flair. The Ric Flair like special that they were trying to do recently. And it
yeah.
was like around the same time that the all his accusations came out, and
Mm.
Ric Flair comes from that same period as
Oh
you know
yeah.
Vince and Pritchard.
Yep.
And it's like we did what we did because it was what we did, and that's just how we did it then.
Yeah. The
Right,
the
wrong, or
thing
indifferent is how we did it.
the thing about Flair, this is the story I'll always tell about Flair, because Flair was my favorite, right? There wasn't even anybody close, right?
Right.
Loved I loved his shit talking. I loved, the fact that he was not the biggest guy, but he would fight the biggest guy and still win, like
Yeah.
things like that, right? Love that about Flair. And the WWE had this animated series. I forget what it was called, but it was like
Story time.
story time. Thank you. And they would tell all these old like stories, which I love those stories. I love those stories. I want to hear a million of those. That's why shoot interviews and like things like that are so popular, because you get to hear the real stories behind everything that happened. And
Right.
they decided, oh, this is a cute anecdote, right? We're gonna make an animated cartoon series about the plane ride from hell. And then like the 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 whole idea behind it shifted about, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago. It's probably around Me Too, around those
Yeah.
things. But like all of a sudden it was just like, oh, this is super fucked up what happened. This isn't like a funny story that we can tell, like, oh, and then like Tommy Dreamer got really fucked up and Goldust was like really drunk, and like, all, no, like that shit's not funny. That shit doesn't fly anymore.
Yeah.
And I like to tell people when they're just like, oh, well, it's just boys being boys, or those sorts of things. I'm like, why don't you watch the plane ride from hell episode? I don't forget what the actual episode title is of that storytellers, but like it's probably called The Plane Ride from Hell because
It might as well be because how
because
we
they
all
had no
know it.
self awareness. They're just like, oh, like, and then I
And
came
it's
out and I like showed my dick to all of the stewardesses, and you're like, what? That is fucked up. What are you doing, you fucking perverted old man? You know,
and
it's
you
like
think about it, it's like how many channels did that have to go through, and no one was like,
a dozen, right?
maybe because someone had to draw that.
Well, how do you? So okay, right. I can get behind all that. Yeah, like somebody had to draw it, all those things. Somebody had to sell it. My thought process behind this is the legal department doesn't look at this and go, guys, maybe we just don't fucking tell this story, on national
Just,
television and
oh,
act like it was fucking funny. It's like, what? What? What?
and it comes
Did,
from
did they
it's a
not have
story
lawyers
told
then?
by those guys from that period of time
Yeah,
where it's like, meh, we can use women, it's fine.
it's
Like
fine. It was
Tony
all
Atlas
fine.
says in this documentary, he's
All
like,
totally fine.
that's what we did.
Yeah, that's what we
We
did.
just women were back there. We just
That was
we just
that
we
was
just
the role
abused
back
all of them.
then.
It's
Use.
just yeah. If you were back there, you knew what was up.
Right. It's like,
And
oh well, did somebody pulled their dick out in front of you. Well, of course they did. That was the times. People just pulled their dicks out in the '90s.
and there's a difference if you're in like a party situation where it's consensual behavior,
Right.
right? Because you know
I've seen my friend's
it's
ball bag before, and I'm just like, oh man, you shouldn't have probably pulled your balls out, but it was pretty funny in the moment, and nobody seems to be super upset about it or anything. But like in the future, would not really
yeah
recommend doing that.
yeah that's a 1-star thing.
That's a
Um,
exactly
it's like I mean I've been at parties where we were in an environment where you knew what went down in that environment. You didn't bring new people without
right,
having a talk with them first. It's like, hey, are you sure this is a place you want to be? Because this is an after party and shit gets weird at this after party. Um,
Are
and
we
I'm not
talking
going to
about
say,
Imaginarium now? I think we are.
no, I am not. This is long before my Imaginarium
All
days.
right, fair enough.
This is these details of these stories would get me canceled. Even though I didn't do anything, I was just there. Um,
Yeah,
but it's one of those things where you're sitting in the doorway and you're talking to a guy who a couple hours ago was performing on stage. You turn around, you see behaviors, and you're
yeah,
like, all right. So as I was saying, when
right,
the economy fell,
right,
and and again, so but you're in an environment where all the people in the environment are aware of what's happening.
right. Yeah,
It's a
it's not a
consensual
shock to
thing because we're
anybody.
all there.
Mm,
This was the plane ride from hell. These situations at the tanning salon, these
yeah,
conditions backstage, these were not the same. We can
no,
talk about our party lives, and I've seen there have been some crazy parties that I've
yep,
been to. I'm sure you've been to some crazy
oh yeah,
parties, and these are not those.
no,
So be very clear, these are not those kind of fun times. They're portrayed as such,
right,
and I think that that's the part where we really have to, as a society, look forward that we may have, the people involved, the flayers and the wrestlers, may be consenting to doing and being involved in certain
right.
things, but they are unwillingly involving other people. But they
That are
were at
not
a point
consenting at
where,
all.
but when you're like a Ric Flair at the time and a Vince McMahon at the time,
Yep,
they didn't care because they felt
no,
like, well, it's me. I'm Ric Flair, bitch. So I can do
right.
anything I want. And you're going
17
to,
times world champion, jet
aren't you
plane
happy that
riding
you're in the
limousine.
presence of Ric Flair? All the women want me. Don't you want me too?
Right,
Clearly
exactly.
you do. You obviously do. I see how you're looking at me. You obviously want me. And so it's that ego.
Mm,
It's that believing your own hype. And that's one of the things that they kind of closed the documentary on is that it's kind of like Vince McMahon. Vince talks about how despite having said that there's no comparison whatsoever between Vince and Mr. McMahon, the character,
Yeah.
he says that, after a while, it's like the lines blur between the two,
Mm-hmm.
and it's hard to tell the difference between Vince and Mr. McMahon.
Yeah.
And one's the true self and one's an exaggeration, and I can't tell which one's which. And I
Yep.
think that when you live in a persona, you know, whether that is as a wrestler, as an actor, as a professional athlete,
Mm-hmm.
hell, as a writer or a creative in a certain space,
Yeah.
once you have a certain persona, it's really kind of hard to divide that line.
Yeah.
I mean, even for me, the difference between the Dewan L. Hearn that my wife married and said I do, to versus the guy who walks through a convention calling himself the Moon, there are some lines that are kind of
Yeah.
blurred, and it's kind of like, all right, well, how much Moon does she know, and how much Dewan do we get?
Yeah.
And there's a line there, and when
Yeah.
you have to, sometimes if you got social anxieties, you kind of have to create a persona for that safety. So I kind of get, and I don't shun Vince for creating an
A
alternate version
character.
of himself,
Yeah.
because essentially everyone in that field does.
Sure.
But despite the abuse, despite the character creation, despite the incredible product that he helped uh, foster into existence, the achievements that he's made over the span of decades that have revolutionized wrestling, sports, television,
Yeah.
pay-per-view, streaming, all of this stuff has some sort of tie and origin that Vince McMahon has had his hand. You
Yeah.
watching Netflix, the existence of Netflix and watching shows like um, that comes from cable, and Vince may not have been the one who invented it, but
Right.
his fingerprints
Yep.
are on its mainstream. It's kind of like ignoring porn's involvement in the advancement of the VHS.
Right. Or technology in
Sure,
general.
you might
Yeah.
have a bunch of Disney movies on VHS, but the reason why you don't have them on Betamax is because of porn.
Yeah.
And that's just the facts of it. So, um, it has been 3.5.
Yeah.
The best 3.5 hours I've ever done on a show. You haven't done them all at once. Um, but that's kind of my closing statement. Um, what
Yeah.
is your overall closing statement on this documentary, on Vince McMahon, on the portrayal, the whole kickaboo?
I mean, it's kind of funny. So, like, I had heard about this documentary a long time ago, and I had honestly written it off immediately. Right? I'm just like, what a piece of shit that guy is. I just can't watch something that celebrates that. Right?
Right.
And then somebody said, just watch the first episode. They're like, I think that you're going to find that the lack of self awareness is going to be enough for you to be able to like really be able to like consume this. And they were 100% correct because like I was just like, wow, like he's so out of touch. It's so amazing. Um, and like the fact that he's been so insulated from all of this is pretty amazing, and that he felt comfortable enough that he was willing to like talk, I don't want to say truthfully, but like truthfully enough that it was like super detrimental to,
Candid.
yeah, candidly enough that it fucked him bad. It fucked him bad.
Because there's
And
even that part where we didn't even talk about it, where he's like, "Oh yeah, our show didn't contain any of
oh
this
yeah,
violence and rape," and then they show the part
right.
where it happened, and it's like that showed the I think that was in in Attitude, episode 4.
It was like 4 or 5, yeah, where it was just
Yeah.
like it showed the detachment. I think it was 4. I think it was Attitude.
Yeah.
Because like Attitude was where they really pushed the boundaries, so it would make sense that would be where like the sort of the question would be asked. But like, yeah, I mean, just like you can't deny what he did or what he made wrestling, you know, from sort of like a sideshow carnival act to like something that's mainstream and incredible. And like now, like if you would have told me 20 years ago that ESPN would take wrestling seriously, you know, at some point, like I was just like, no, come on, man. Like they'll never get over the fact that it's predetermined, right? You know, like they'll just be like, oh, it's not the Super Bowl. We don't know who wins the Super Bowl. You know, it's just like that's not the important part. The important part is like how many Super Bowls do you watch where you're just like, this is garbage, right? Like one team is clearly much better than the other, and like
there have been some boring Super Bowls.
oh, about 45 out of the 50 of them have been boring, and like, but how many times has the main event for WrestleMania been boring?
And that's one of the reasons why pro wrestling is the way it is. It's
Yep.
When
It gives you what you want.
When wrestling was not predetermined, it took forever.
Yep.
And people got bored. So they're
Yep.
like, well, how about we just determine the winner, schedule it, and then make a show out of it like that, and it's been a juggernaut since.
Yep. And so, like, I mean, there's lots of things that, I mean, fuck Vince for a million different reasons, you know, but like he does deserve credit for like the things that he did, you know. Still fuck him, you know. I'm not saying, hey, oh, I'm just, oh my god, the ratings for Raw justified him being a shitbag human. No, fuck that, you know,
Like we said before, we will objectively observe this, but we are not in any way condoning his behaviors.
But at the same time, you know, it's just like it's impossible to say he didn't have an impact. It's impossible to say he didn't shape the way that cable television was. You know, it's like it's absurd, right? You know, like I'm sorry, he's a terrible person, right? You know, like P.T. Barnum was not a great person either, but we understand that he was the guy that created the circus. You know, it's like yeah, oh god, like all those gross things. You know, it's just like, but he understood.
And that's kind of one of the things that's been coming to light a lot more recently is you have these moguls who have made a lot of money creating these wonderful products, enriching a lot of lives and making a lot of people like changing their lives for the better while also being a piece of shit.
Yep.
While also being bad people. I like to remind people sometimes you had to kind of remember this, and then I'll kind of like essentially close. I'll let you get the last word as you kind of like reintroduce yourself. It's been a while since they've heard from you. But sometimes people, and this is something you have to remember in life in general, sometimes bad people do good things.
Yeah, it's true.
And that is a truth that you have to come to terms with. Because mind you, like I just watched that Lou Pearlman documentary.
Yeah.
And he changed all kinds of people's lives.
Oh yeah.
He created these boy bands that these people grew up with loving and gave careers to people like Lance Bass and Chris Kirkpatrick and Justin Timberlake and all of these people created all of this music that everyone still loves and fawns over to this day, 30 years later. These people have careers, jumped off and started because this guy said, hey, you know what? We're going to start a group. We're going to start a band. We're going to put you on world tours, make you a world household name. And he did. And, but he also screwed a whole bunch of people out of money, committed a whole lot of fraud. He owes people millions of dollars prior to his death. And they're never going to get that money.
Yep.
He fucked over a lot of people. Vince McMahon created this beautiful, he revolutionized this beautiful art form that we know in professional wrestling. Professional wrestling will always be one of the most beautiful things to me. It is still the greatest form of theater. None of that negates the shitty way he treated
Yeah.
people, the terrible things that he did, the
Yep.
way that he abused and mistreated people. And I hope that everyone who has been wronged gets what they deserve.
Yeah.
I
I
hope I
mean,
hope they get what they deserve out of this. I hope they find some justice that they can ultimately live with. Because, like in most cases, there's no true justice.
right.
You can get whatever size check you want, but you're still going to have that trauma you're dealing with.
Yep.
No amount of money is going to take that away.
Yep.
So, I hope that they get the justice that they're happy with. I hope that they can find peace. Um, but just remember, bad people do good things.
That's true.
And you just kind of have to. That's the lens upon which I look at Weinstein's, Perlman's, McMahon's, um, Cosby's, R. Kelly's, Diddy's.
Yeah.
Sometimes bad people do good things, and so
Yep.
just because they did a good thing doesn't just absolve them of their bad
Yep.
deed.
Yeah.
And
It's been a weird
that will
sort of
that
like,
will last couple of years.
yeah. I mean, it's been a weird fucking week, man. Like
I
with
mean,
all
yeah, a lot of this shit's been out. Just oof. Don't even get me
all the
started.
Diddy stuff, you know, I mean,
I'm
everybody
glad I
probably
don't
was
do a
like,
Diddy.
oh, yeah, Diddy, of course, did that. But, you know, it's like, now that you know, you're just like,
Yeah, I had a conversation about that the other night. This is not a Diddy channel or episode. So
yeah.
it's been almost 4 hours. I
No,
think
yeah.
it was a six some odd hour documentary. We weren't going to get it over with in 20 minutes. Um,
Yeah.
so anyone who happens to catch it this far, God bless you.
Yeah,
Um,
seriously.
I don't know
I
how to.
just like talking about stuff, you know, and like I had lots of opinions on this, and you know,
I
and it
had
wasn't even as ugly as it could have been. Like I was
no.
like, oh, they didn't even go as like as low as they could have. I was kind of shocked a little bit, you know.
No, I think they still have to make it palatable to be watched.
Maybe they'll do. Maybe like I was joking about. Oh, there'll be a season two, and maybe that's not that far off.
I
Maybe a one
mean,
episode like wrap up of like you know.
there might be an episode 7. I don't know about
Yeah,
season 2, but there could be an episode 7.
I could see that for sure. Once we
Uh,
get like the
the case
whole.
is settled. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, people have signed the different you know papers and stuff like that, but it'd be interesting. I would love to see that episode because that's
And we
the
will
one.
cover, if there is an episode 7, I'll hit you up and we'll go here.
Yeah,
It won't
totally.
be anywhere close to this long. A 1
No.
hour episode, we can do in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
But yeah, tell whoever's left
Yeah.
where they can look you up and find you.
Yeah. So I my podcast is BS Movies on anywhere that you can get podcasts. Um, myself and my podcast partner Shelly have been together for 7+ years at this point. Like at this point, we don't even live in the same state anymore. Like it's all over the internet, you know, like that's how long it's been. So, but like we just love to talk about various different things and love horror movies. We're getting ready to literally tomorrow, literally like a few hours from now, I'll be like doing some um, Halloween themed episodes for the podcast. Gonna do women in horror and black and white horror and some other things for Halloween this year. Should be a lot of fun. You can actually hear us talk to a fairly decent sized star for a movie. We'll wait until that has actually been recorded before.
Yeah.
I've been trying to get this on the books for like months now, and the guy's super nice, and like I love him, you know, but like this is one of those ones where I'm like, I will announce that episode when it's recorded and I've got it
When it's done.
scheduled.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean,
So
even for this episode, I made 2 graphics I'm like, I know he's in, but in case something happens,
Yeah. You
in
never
case something
know.
happens. And I
You
didn't.
never
I honestly,
know.
I didn't release the graphic for this episode until like
That's right.
5 or 10 minutes before
May-
we recorded.
Maybe Bret Hart takes his revenge against me for saying that he's a grumpy old man or something. You know, who knows? Who knows?
Who
He
knows?
puts he puts me in the sharpshooter, and then suddenly I am got the Phoenix screw job or something.
Yeah, let's see Bret Hart do a sharpshooter. Let's get
Right.
that far first.
But the only thing that I really want to sort of like wrap up at the end here is that next year at Imaginarium, when Don Guillory starts walking that title around, I'm gonna need you to distract him while I hit him with a coconut or I don't know something super offensive and stereotypical. While I feel I am the one time doctor of history from uh, Mississippi State or where the fuck he's from. I don't know. I always have to look my title up, but like I have a doctorate, former because I lost it back to him, but
Right.
But next time I see him, every time I hold that title, that's a title change in my opinion. So I'm gonna need
I mean, if he lets you
somebody to
have it,
run some interference for me while I do that.
I got you. Me and him did a stare off with this one. I had this with me
Yeah,
last year.
right.
We did the stare off, but we didn't get a chance to get the picture in, which was terrible. I'm so mad we didn't get the picture.
That's all right.
It's all right. Cool. So I'll go ahead and just look. Whew, it's late here. It's almost midnight,
Oh yeah.
and we've been on it for a minute. So I'll just go ahead and say thank you all for watching this long, if anyone does, and um, I'll see you guys the next time, and I guarantee you won't take this long. My next episode will not be 4 hours
All
long.
right. If you say so, but we all
Right, I don't know. I mean,
we
I
all
started
know
now.
4 hours.
I've started now. I want to do it on my own docu-series.
Yeah, that's
See if I
right.
can split this up into 4 episodes.
Bret Hart, grumpy old man, the
Right.
docu-series. All right. Well,
Thank you,
thank you for
everyone.
having me. I really appreciate that.
Man,
This was a lot of
it's been
fun.
fantastic. We'll do this again for
Yeah.
less time. And hey, if you ever need a guest on your show, hit me up.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'd love to.
We'll get you on for some horror episodes for sure. So
Fantastic, man. All right,
right.
guys, we're out for real this time. So long.
Bye.